You never expect your entire life to pivot over a single scribble on a whiteboard. But that's exactly what happened to me. I wasn't supposed to be in that room. I wasn't even supposed to notice the board. My job was to clean the tables, wipe the glass, empty the trash. To be invisible. That was the unspoken rule of night shifts in corporate America. But that night, something changed. A quiet whisper of numbers caught my eye, and somehow they pulled me in. A puzzle no one else could solve. 15 MBA graduates had stared at that board and walked away empty. But me? I couldn't resist. Not because I wanted to prove something, but because it felt like home. And just like that, I solved it. No applause, no reward, no spotlight, just a faint whisper of my name, erased moments later in fear. I thought that would be the end, a secret between me and that board. I was wrong, because someone saw it. Someone who would unravel everything I'd tried so hard to hide. This isn't just a story about math. It's about being seen, truly seen, for the first time. It's about how brilliance can bloom in silence, and what happens when someone dares to believe in a janitor with a past and a pencil-thin shot at redemption. Stick around. You might just see yourself in this story too. Subscribe to John's Stories channel for more tales that surprise, move, and inspire every single day.
My name is Emily. I'm 25, and until recently, I pushed a janitor's cart through marble corridors that echoed louder than the voices that ever spoke to me. I used to love the silence. Now I wonder if it was just another form of hiding. It happened on a Tuesday night, or technically, early Wednesday morning. The city was asleep, the building was nearly pitch black, and I was making my usual rounds on floor 60 of West Edge Innovations, one of those modern tech firms with glass walls and Nespresso stations and startup energy, even though they were a billion-dollar company. Room B was always last on my list, the big boardroom with the long conference table and panoramic skyline view. I never expected anything from it, just coffee stains and the occasional pizza box. But that night, the whiteboard wasn't wiped clean like usual. There it was, an equation. Not a doodle or scribble, but a real problem, written cleanly with a small note below it. 15 candidates, none solved it, still hiring. That line alone tugged at something I'd buried a long time ago. You see, I didn't always clean offices. 2 years ago, I was months away from graduating from the University of Chicago. Applied mathematics, honors, a paper on stochastic models of epidemiological systems that nearly earned me a summer stint at Stanford. I'd already been accepted to MIT for postgrad research. And then the call came. My dad, who raised me alone since I was 11, had collapsed. Heart failure. No insurance, no backup plan, just me. In one conversation, I traded partial differential equations for dialysis schedules. Scholarship letters gave way to stacks of medical bills. MIT could wait, I told myself, just 1 year. That year became indefinite. I picked up jobs, waitress, data entry, eventually janitorial night shifts because it paid just enough and no one asked about your resume when you carried a mop. I told myself the math didn't matter anymore. But that night, standing in that dimly lit boardroom, the numbers pulled me back. My eyes scanned the equation. A company has 1,000 employees. Each day, 3% quit and 2% are newly hired. When will the workforce shrink to 500? It wasn't just a logic puzzle. It was poetry in disguise. I could see the curve forming in my mind, the logarithmic decay shaded in intuition. My hand reached out before my fear could pull it back. And 3 minutes later, the answer was there. 69 days, with a general formula. Elegant, predictable, beautiful. I signed my name beneath it, like I used to on the chalkboards at school. And then, I panicked. What was I doing? This wasn't my world to solve. These weren't my problems to solve. So I erased it, all of it, except the math. I left the answer behind like a ghost in faded ink, and I walked out. But what I didn't know is that someone else walked in the next morning. David Walker, the CEO of West Edge, had a reputation. Brilliant, demanding, detail-obsessed. The kind of guy who remembered the font size on your last slide but forgot his own lunch. He noticed everything. So of course he noticed the board. And unlike others, he didn't assume a junior exec had cracked it. He checked the cameras. There I was, paused at the whiteboard, lost in thought, moving with the kind of clarity that comes from years of practice. He watched me write the answer. He saw the name Emily Carter appear and then disappear. Something in him clicked. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. He pulled my HR file. Emily Carter, night shift cleaner, hired 8 months ago. Education, withdrawn from University of Chicago. No further details. But David wasn't the type to stop at surface-level details. He made calls, checked records, my GPA, my professors, the half-finished thesis, the medical deferment letter. And he started noticing more. Room B was always perfectly organized after my shifts. Supply cabinets were reordered for optimal efficiency. The break room coffee flow improved, not by policy, but by observation. And the suggestion box, long ignored, suddenly filled with anonymous workflow proposals, each handwritten, each quietly transformative. He didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, he left a second equation on the board, harder this time, more complex, less clean. No note, no signature, just a challenge. I walked into that room the next night and felt my heart leap. It was an invitation. I hesitated. My hands trembled, but the numbers called louder than my fear. And this time, I didn't just solve it. I solved it 3 ways, included optimization graphs, cost-benefit trade-offs. I poured my entire soul into those formulas, like it was a thesis disguised as a whiteboard puzzle. And I signed my name again. Below it, I wrote, "I'm sorry for hiding. I was afraid success would cost someone else again." Then I cleaned the room like I always did, like nothing had happened. But it had. The next morning, David didn't ask questions. He sent for me. Not through HR, not through security. He came down to the janitor's locker room and found me rinsing out a mop bucket. I'll never forget what he said. "Emily, do you realize you just solved a problem my entire engineering team struggled with for a week?" I mumbled something, probably an apology. But he stopped me. Gently. Firmly. "You shouldn't be apologizing for being brilliant," he said. "You should be building the systems this company runs on." I didn't believe him at first. People like me don't get promotions. We get ignored, replaced, forgotten. But David wasn't joking. He gave me a desk, a mentor, a training program. He also fired the HR manager who tried to intimidate me, someone I'd barely mentioned. He said I hired her to find talent, and she tried to bury it instead. And just like that, everything began to shift. I didn't walk into that new role like a phoenix rising from ashes. No, It was more like stepping barefoot into unfamiliar snow, hesitant, unsure, and so very aware of how much I didn't belong. The first week in the development program, I ate lunch in my car. The second week, I stopped bringing my cleaning uniform just in case someone mistook me again. By the third week, something strange began to happen. People, real employees, the ones with plaques on their doors and senior in their titles, started asking me questions. Actual questions about logic, systems, efficiency. I hadn't realized how hungry I was to be useful in that way again, to have my mind engaged, respected. But still, I struggled. Imposter syndrome doesn't care about how smart you are. It lingers, whispers, waits for you to mess up so it can pounce with a cruel little laugh. See, you don't belong here. I remember one meeting in particular. We were reviewing proposed back-end optimizations for server load reduction. The CTO presented a 9-month timeline and a 6-figure implementation budget. I raised my hand, nervously, and asked, what if we applied a shifting queue load balancer and reassigned the sorting logic from servers to endpoints? Silence. Then David said calmly, "Go on." I outlined my reasoning, walked them through the numbers. The results? A 2-month implementation, 1/3 the cost, same performance gains. They stared at me like I'd performed a magic trick. But it wasn't magic. It was just what I used to do before my life fell apart. When the meeting ended, David pulled me aside. He didn't praise me, not exactly. He said, "You've saved us more than money today, Emily. You've changed how people in this room will think about talent." I didn't fully understand what he meant until I saw Sarah. Sarah worked in marketing, sharp suits, sharp tongue, and always walking like she was late to something important. A week after my suggestion got implemented, she passed me in the hallway and said, "Thanks for solving that server thing. I think I was part of the glare problem." I blinked. "Glare?" She smirked. "In the boardroom. You moved the presentation screen a while back, right? No one else noticed, but it fixed the light reflecting off it. I used to get migraines from that." I had forgotten. It was such a small thing, I thought at the time. But she remembered. These little ripples, they meant something. It reminded me of a real-life story I once read about a janitor at NASA in the 1960s who was asked by a visitor what he did. He replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." He wasn't wrong, because when you believe in the mission, every role becomes meaningful. That janitor didn't fix rockets. He fixed the spaces around them so others could do their job better. That used to be me. Now I got to design the systems directly. Not everyone was thrilled. There were whispers, eye rolls. A few department heads were slow to take my advice, brushing me off politely until David overrode them. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation in the break room. "She's smart, yeah, but promotions like that, it's a PR stunt. No degree, no credentials." She was a janitor, man. Come on. It stung more than I expected. I tried to ignore it, tried to remind myself, let the work speak for itself. But one night, I stayed late again, back in that same conference room where it all began. I sat staring at the very whiteboard that changed my life. I didn't draw equations this time. I wrote something different. Talent doesn't need certificates. It just needs someone to see it. 6 months passed, then a year. I officially became systems analyst. My models were saving the company hundreds of thousands in operational costs, but something still pulled at me, something beyond code or metrics. One morning, as I passed the janitor's closet, my old closet, I saw Maria. She was new, young, quiet, struggling with English, but every time I saw her, she carried a small sketchbook tucked under her arm. Curious, I invited her for coffee. That's when I learned Maria was an artist, a brilliant one. She hadn't drawn in years because she thought no one cared. She cleaned to pay rent while her portfolio sat gathering dust. I remembered what it felt like to be unseen. So I brought her story to David. Together, we launched something we called the Hidden Genius Initiative. Its mission was simple: find the overlooked. In the mailroom, the kitchen, the loading dock. People who didn't have polished resumes, but had raw, unpolished brilliance. We offered workshops, mentorships, scholarships. We asked questions no one had ever thought to ask, and they answered beautifully. Marcus, our mail guy, who used to doodle code snippets on scrap envelopes, turned out to be a data visualization savant. James, a janitor like I once was, solved an inventory tracking issue that had stumped logistics for months. And Maria, she designed our entire internal branding system. The boardroom, once reserved for suits and summaries, was now a place where all voices echoed, not because it was trendy, but because it worked. One Friday afternoon, we held a session where each of the hidden geniuses presented a capstone project. As I looked around that table, 12 faces, all once overlooked, I felt something deep and humbling. I had not simply been given a second chance. I had become someone who gave them two. Still, the most powerful moment came not from a project, but from a question. It was near the end of our session. Mike, the building's oldest employee, he'd been around since West Edge was just an idea and a rented office, stood up. His hands shook a little from age, but his voice didn't. You know what I've learned in 65 years? Every person you ignore might be the one who saves you. Silence fell. And in that stillness, I felt the truth settle over the room like sunlight warming old floorboards. Because he was right. That evening, I walked through the offices before everyone else arrived. Habit, maybe. Or maybe a ritual. In the break room, I saw something written on the board. It wasn't mine. It was a new equation. Below it, careful handwriting read, "Solution in progress. Feedback welcome." It was James. I smiled, picked up a marker, and wrote underneath, "Elegant approach. Let's discuss at lunch." It wasn't just that people were solving problems. They were beginning to believe they had the right to. That, I think, was the bigger revolution. I still don't know what would have happened if David hadn't checked the cameras that night. Maybe I'd still be in room B scrubbing coffee stains. Maybe none of this would have unfolded. The truth is, most stories like mine never do. Most of us never get seen. And that's why we keep building bridges. We keep looking closer. We keep asking the quiet ones if they have something to say. Because sometimes they're holding the answer to $1 million problem in their heads and just need one person to care enough to listen.
18 months after I first stood in that quiet conference room with trembling hands and a dry erase marker, I found myself in a very different place. Same company, same floor, but this time, I was the one at the head of the boardroom table. No mop, no uniform, no need to erase my name. I was about to present at the quarterly board meeting as the newly appointed Director of Systems Optimization. That title still felt strange to me. Heavy, like it belonged to someone older, more composed, maybe even someone who hadn't spent half her life fearing the sound of her own success. But the numbers didn't lie. My algorithms had saved us over $2 million in just under a year. Employee retention was up, system latency was down, and most surprisingly, creativity across departments had exploded thanks to the Hidden Genius initiative. I looked around the boardroom table. 12 of us sat there, myself, some execs, and the very first graduating class of our initiative. Marcus, formerly of the mailroom, now a junior data analyst. James, the janitor turned systems engineer for inventory flow. Maria, the shy artist who now headed our internal UX branding. Each of them had their own battles, their own equations to solve, metaphorically and otherwise. But we were here, together, not because someone gave us power, but because someone finally recognized we'd always had it. I opened the meeting by walking to the whiteboard, just like I had all those months ago. And I wrote, "Talent doesn't need certificates. It needs someone to see it." Then I turned to the group and said, "This isn't just about us. It's about everyone we'll meet going forward. Every receptionist with an idea, every delivery driver with a concept, every intern with a question that makes the room go silent. And maybe, just maybe, about every Emily Carter still cleaning offices at 2 a.m., afraid that their gift is more dangerous than their silence." You know, the corporate world is obsessed with credentials, degrees, GPAs, recommendations. We've built entire skyscrapers on polished paper trails. But we forget something vital. Not everyone gets the luxury of climbing those ladders. Life happens. Tragedy reroutes us. Family needs override dreams. And brilliance, unpolished, raw, deeply human brilliance, gets left behind, dusted off only when someone dares to look in places others ignore. That's what David Walker understood, and it's what I hope you'll remember too. I still get emails now, from people in Brazil, in India, from single moms in Tennessee to warehouse workers in the Bronx. Some tell me they used to love physics but had to drop out. Others say they haven't touched a textbook in years but still think in code. And they always ask the same thing. Is it too late for someone like me? My answer? Not if you still have questions. Not if your brain still lights up when something clicks. Not if you still solve problems no one sees. There's one last moment I want to share. It happened a few weeks ago, just before this board meeting. Mike, remember him? The old veteran of the company. Always a quiet presence in the back. He stopped by my office. First time ever. He didn't say much, just placed something on my desk. A framed photo. It was the whiteboard from that night. The first equation. Faded, a little blurry, but you could still see the outline of the name I once erased. Emily Carter. I stared at it. He nodded and said, "You kept the company from losing itself." That moment broke something open in me. Because for so long, I believed I had failed. Not just myself, but my father. I thought hiding my mind was the only way to survive in a world that punishes brilliance without pedigree. But I was wrong. Success doesn't cause pain. Life causes pain. Hiding just keeps the world from healing. Now I stand in boardrooms, at conferences, and classrooms full of wide-eyed interns. I tell my story again and again, not because it's heroic, but because it's common. Too many people live one breath away from being seen.
And sometimes all it takes is a camera feed. A problem no one else solved. A janitor who stayed 3 minutes longer than scheduled. A CEO who still believed in potential over paperwork. That's all it takes to rewrite a future. So here's what I leave you with. Maybe you're watching this as someone who walked away from your dream because life demanded it. Maybe you're in a job that doesn't value your mind. Or maybe, just maybe, you're someone in a position to open doors for others. Whichever role you're in, remember this. Genius doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. In break rooms, in margins, in late-night scribbles no one was supposed to see. And sometimes it walks down sterile hallways, pushing a cleaning cart, waiting for a chance to return to itself. The next time you find brilliance where you least expect it, don't look away. Invite it in. You never know how many futures you're saving by choosing to see what others ignore. And if you're wondering what happened next, well, the Hidden Genius Initiative is still growing. Marcus is mentoring the next class. Maria just launched her own design firm. WestEdge was her first client. James? He's building an AI-based inventory tracking system we're testing next quarter. As for me, I still walk through the halls early, before most people arrive. Not to clean, but to observe, to listen. Sometimes I find new notes left on the whiteboard. Equations, ideas, even jokes. And sometimes I write back. Because the revolution that changed my life didn't start with a promotion. It started the moment someone believed my ideas were worth answering. The lesson? Potential doesn't always wear a badge. It doesn't care about your title or your tie. It lives in the corners of companies, waiting for someone with eyes kind enough and brave enough to notice. And the one variable that makes all the difference? Courage. Courage to speak up. Courage to be seen. Courage to believe that we all, yes, all of us, have something remarkable to offer. You just have to give yourself and others permission. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Emily, or if you're inspired to spot the hidden geniuses around you, please subscribe to John's Stories. We share stories like this every day. Real, emotional, quietly powerful. Because the best revolutions, they start quietly, just like Emily's did, just like yours might, tonight.